I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on GBN, we're exploring how language shapes identity, power, and culture with a terrific author by the name of Dr. Dwarka Ramphal. His groundbreaking book is called Let Us Talk, and in it, he challenges the idea of so-called standard English and exposes how linguistic prejudice creates social divisions, from colonial legacies in education to the everyday voices of ordinary people. This powerful work argues for authenticity, equality, and the right to speak without stigma. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today. We thank the team at Atticus Publishing for helping us put him on TV today, and we ask viewers like you to support authors like him by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing his amazing book. The links are below this interview. Dwarka, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you, Logan. The pleasure is mine.
This is such a powerful book and an empowering book because people are held back, are often viewed with prejudice because of their language patterns or their speech patterns. Talk to us about what you mean by linguistic genocide.
Well, what has happened in genocide is you destroy a whole nation, a whole group of people. In linguistic genocide, and we've seen it, unfortunately, in North America, in South America, with the Native Americans in parts of Africa, what has happened is people's identity, people's life and livelihood and understanding of the world is based on their language. I understand the world based on the words that I use to construct and reconstruct reality around me. When somebody comes from another place and destroys that, we've done it with the Native Americans in the United States, and we try to teach them English. Let me give you an example of what I mean is in the United States, and then I'd continue that trend of thought a little bit more. I think it was Reuben Snake who said that when the arrangements were made with the Native Americans, they didn't have a concept of land ownership. They didn't understand what it means to own land because they rove from place to place, and you didn't bring the land here, you can't take it with you. How can you own it? So when they signed those contracts, those agreements, the reality of their language, they didn't have a way to understand what it means to own land. Now, in terms of linguistic genocide, we take people and try to discredit their language sometimes in subtle ways by saying it's dumb to say something like that, or they can't speak proper English, or why can't you understand me? And we try to reconstruct their language into something different from them. And in doing that, we may think that we're having upward mobility, that we're teaching the underdogs to learn middle class barking. But it doesn't happen that way. What we're actually doing is destroying their sense of reality, their understanding of the world. So when we kill their language, we're destroying a whole perception, a whole reality of the world itself. It's still happening today, even in places in the Caribbean. I'm from Guyana, South America. And in places like Guyana, like Jamaica, Trinidad, Tobago, a group of people still strive towards standard English, what used to be the Queen's English, now the King's English. But we strive for that. But in doing that, we do not realize that we are erasing committing genocide for a whole group of people that perceive the world differently from we do.
Language is an essential part of any culture. If you erase the language, you're erasing the culture, right?
That is correct. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, that is
Why,
how.
why do you think people often equate accents with intelligence or lack of intelligence?
Well, two things about that. The way one speaks is a geographic accident. If I was born in China, I'd learn, depending on what part of China, I would learn Chinese or whatever language, speak it fluently, write it fluently. So it is a geographic accident the way one speaks. Now, in direct response to your question, what happens many times is a social class, money, politics, and class, social class, kind of dictates what we consider to be standard. Even America itself, we talk about standard American English, which is very elusive in the United States, but is different in New York as in Florida. But
Exactly.
so we have this perception of standard
Yeah.
that keeps eluding us.
It's interesting. You mentioned China. Even in China, other Chinese people judge themselves on how well they speak Mandarin. They talk about he or she speaks standard Mandarin. And if they don't, they say, oh, perhaps that person's from a farm or something like that. They look at them in a negative light. So it's interesting that many cultures look at others who don't have quote unquote proper Mandarin or proper English or whatever the language might be as somehow lacking, right?
And the negative part of it, the worst part of it, is that we make a judgment of that person about the person's intelligence or the
Mhm.
person's ability to think, ability to function in effectively. And it's not because the language is bad or is bad language or poor language. I can't remember who was talking about English does not, sorry, Creole, the Creolese in Guyana or the Creole language doesn't have plurality. They would say three boy rather than three boys. And they said it doesn't have plurality. But if we use that as a judgment of poor language or lack of intelligence, then English itself doesn't add plurality as the Spanish do, right?
Yeah.
Or gender, casa roja, casas rojas, the red house, right? And then we don't say red's house, we say red house. We do not add plurality to the adjective like the Spanish does. But that doesn't mean that English is an inferior language. We don't make a judgment about intelligence and ability to think profoundly and develop complex thoughts or anything based on that kind of reasoning.
I think here within the United States, we judge people by language, by region. If we hear a Southern accent, I think to a lot of people, they think they're not as educated and they don't come from as high a class as people who speak with what they call a neutral accent or a Midwestern accent. You know, if I was on the show today talking to you like this, talking in a Southern accent, some people might say, well, that guy's not too smart, you know?
Exactly.
So it's amazing how people are judged by the way they speak, right?
And incidentally, I teach at Federal Technical Community College and I teach speech, I teach public speaking. And even today, I had discussion with one of my colleagues about how do we deal with regional accents. People from New York come in our classes, people with Spanish accent, well, yeah, Hispanic accent come to our classes. Now, what do you do? I ask him, do you fail them? How do you treat it? And he said that he focuses more on content than on the accent or the regional dialect. He doesn't. He mentions dialect, and in my opinion, what happens with dialect is that the linguists they create a range from what they call acrolect, the highest, to basilect, the lowest, and something they call acrolect in between. But I tried to discuss with him that dialects are not can't be graded that way. We can teach students that if you want a job in a certain place, you have to speak a certain way, you have to communicate a certain way. But it doesn't mean when you go home and you speak with your family that that's bad English or bad language. And that's the whole thing about dialects. We have them across the United States. The bad part about it and one that destroys us is when we make judgments about people based on their dialect. And we should
Exactly.
accept their dialect for what it is. Yes, we should have some common communication, some common way of communicating, but we shouldn't make judgments about people who sound differently from we do. Yes.
Agreed. I actually enjoy the regionalisms in this country. It makes each region seem different. I like the New England accent, the Southern accent, whatever it might be. I appreciate those cultural differences and hope they sustain in this country because sameness in America right now, where everything seems the same. So it's nice to have geographical areas that are different. Let me ask you this. In your book, you discuss the Cockneys and the Bahamians. Why did you choose these groups?
Well, because I taught in the Bahamas, I taught English at St. Paul's College in Freeport, Bahamas for about 6 years. What happened there is that they were recruiting originally English teachers from England rather than from the Caribbean. And the reason why I mentioned it is, well, two reasons actually. In England itself, everyone wants to speak, at that time it was the Queen's English, but in England itself, they have differences, and they have the Cockneys there. They speak differently from other, it's a regional dialect. In the Caribbean, we have the same differences in dialects. We have Jamaicans, we have Trinidadians, we have Guyanese, people from Barbados. We have different dialects. Now, for quite a while, many of the schools in the Bahamas recruited people only from England, neglecting the linguistic value that exists in the Caribbean itself. Now, the Caribbean is a strange place because we have people, slaves, ex-slaves from Africa that has a kind of West African structure in their language. And you can still pick it up in some of the dialects. But of course, it was the English-speaking Caribbean. It was English, the English lexis, the English words that we use. But very often, we merge the English words with the West African structure. And it created a different kind of language. But the good thing about it is that it's mutually intelligible. When I went to the Bahamas, I can understand what they're saying. They understood what I was saying, but still there was a preference for, and I hate to say it, Logan, but part of it may have to do with race.
Oh, of course, a lot of it has to do with race. And even if you watch the old movies, the old movie stars used to talk like this. They almost sounded like they were British, the American stars. They called it a continental accent. And if you wanted to be a movie star, darling, you had to talk like this. So it's interesting how the media also sets the tone. In broadcasting, it's always been they want a neutral Midwestern accent when it comes to speaking on camera. Interesting, in the 80s, they used to talk a lot about Ebonics. Do you remember that? They were
I
talking
remember that very well.
African American dialect, and they called it Ebonics.
I remember that. By the way, you mentioned the movie stars. We don't have time to discuss it, but at some other time out of this interview, I'd love to hear about your journey into the movie world. But at
Yeah,
another
it's been fun. And you do have to learn different dialects, and you do have to learn different accents. I mean, we have so many British actors in this country who have to learn how to speak American English, such as, I can't name one offhand, but
Yes.
there's a lot of them, trust me, including Australian actors who have to learn how to speak American English. Before I leave you today, Doctor, let me ask you this. What do you hope readers or students take away from your book?
Two things, basically. I wanted to understand, first of all, that the way one speaks just happened to be a geographic accident. The second thing I want them to understand is that when a child is born, the child learns two important things about language: listening and speaking. Writing and writing and reading are secondary. Reading is like listening, but with your eyes. Writing is like speaking on paper. So they must understand that the basic things about language are speaking and listening, and that in language teaching, I think, and in teaching public speaking, and I had this discussion with several of my colleagues here, sometimes it is more important to listen to speeches, to listen to what people are saying, to learn appreciation. I know it might not be politically correct at a time like this, but it's more important to listen to people with varying ideas if we, as a modern society, if we're to grow and develop, we must learn with each other and teach each other. I'll give you another quick, simple example. Our college has just shifted from Blackboard to Canvas. And I have many students in my class who understand Canvas a lot better than I do. So I listen to them and they teach me. So when we sit in a classroom, it's not an educator-educatee relationship. We all are educators and educatees at the same time. And I would like for them to take that away from the book.
Absolutely. It is a two-way street. All of communication is a two-way street. There's the message and there is a receiver, and it goes back and forth. And like you said, being a good listener is part of being a good speaker as well. The name of the book we've been talking about today, it is a fascinating book. There's much more to this topic than you'd ever imagine. The book is called Let Us Talk. It is a bold and thought-provoking exploration of how language defines culture, identity, and justice as well. Doctor, thank you so much for joining me here today.
Thank you, Logan. The pleasure, like I said, was certainly mine. This was such a pleasure discussing with you.
A true pleasure speaking with you as well, sir. I appreciate your insight, your wisdom, and your expertise on this subject. To the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford for the Global Book Network. So long for now.